Today's learning objectives. Understand what is meant by illegal wildlife trade. Identify the drivers of wildlife crime. Recall 3 endangered animals. Draw an elephant.
Hello everyone. Lovely to see so many of you joining today. So today we're going to be talking about the illegal wildlife trade. And my name is Amy. So I work at WWF, and today I'm going to be joined with Kate and Paul. Kate is the CEO of an organization called Tale2Tail, and she's the founder as well. She's an artist, a writer, a mother, and a lawyer. And she's the author of a children's book called An Elephant for Breakfast. She believes in the power of children to help save wildlife.
Hello, I'm Kate, and today I'm going to tell you about the story of wildlife crime so that you know what it is and why it happens. You know what elephants are, but there are some fun elephant facts that I bet you didn't know. Did you know that the world's tallest African elephant was almost 4 meters high? A typical room is just over 2 meters high. So if you invited an elephant for breakfast and it stood in your room, the chances are it would break the ceiling. Did you know that elephants live in family groups led by a mother elephant called a matriarch? And here's David Yarrow, an extraordinary wildlife photographer, and he's down on his tummy photographing these huge, magnificent creatures. Elephants also sling about mud. They splash it all over, and the mud works like a sunscreen. It protects their skin from the hot sun. And a final interesting fact about elephants is that if a baby elephant dies, all of the elephants in the family cry, just like us. So today we're going to learn about 6 things. What is wildlife crime? What people buy and sell? Why it happens? We're going to do a little bit of big maths and think about how long until elephants are gone. And I'll ask you a big question. Can children stop wildlife crime? And then hopefully we'll have time for an art lesson with Axel Scheffler, the man who drew the pictures of the Gruffalo.
Teachers, parents, students, take a note of your answers. The actual answers will be revealed during the webinar.
So let's start with 6 important questions. So the first question is, did you know what ivory is? Vote yes or no. The next question is, ivory is made from white stone. True or false? The third question is, ivory comes from the tusks of an elephant. True or false? The fourth question is, people in the UK are allowed to buy and sell ivory. True or false? The fifth question is, would it matter to you if there were no more elephants left in the world? Tick yes, I care, or no, if it doesn't matter to you. And the final question, children can help save wildlife. True or false? So people do buy and sell all sorts of wild animals, from cheetah, giraffe, elephants, pangolin, rhino, zebra. And there are also many others like hippo, tiger, birds, bears, sea turtles. And the wild animals on this page all come from Africa. But actually, endangered animals can be found, bought and sold all over the world. So here's an elephant. We're going to do another vote. What is the main reason people kill elephants? Is it for their meat, their ivory, or for their feet? Most of you know it's ivory, and that is the correct answer. A couple of you thought it might be meat. Elephants aren't usually hunted for meat. It's supposed to be very tough to eat. It is true that people do sometimes occasionally sell elephant feet as ornaments and furniture, but the main reason elephants are being killed and in such big numbers is for their tusks, and the tusks are made of ivory. What is wildlife crime? Well, crime is things like stealing, theft, and burglary. And people make laws to stop crimes. So wildlife crime is where there's a law to protect some wild animals or plants, and then people take the animals or plants for themselves. And there are 4 big words that help describe wildlife crime. The first is poaching. Poaching is when you steal wild animals. It's called theft if you steal a farm animal, but poaching for wild animals. Smuggling. Smuggling is when you take something secretly and illegally across a border from one country to another. Endangered is when there aren't many of those animals left. And extinction is when there's no more of them left, like the dinosaurs. And I guess you all know that unless we do something very soon, the elephants will be extinct too. And later we'll do some big maths to think about how long we might have to try and stop that from happening. So is it against the law to poach, smuggle, buy or sell endangered wildlife? The answer depends where in the world you are, because each country passes their own laws. So in the UK, you are all right. No, it's mostly not allowed to smuggle, buy or sell endangered wildlife. For example, it's against the law to buy and sell ivory or to smuggle it through our borders. The law does, however, say it's okay to buy some very, very, very old ivory objects, such as an old piano or a tiny miniature painting made from a sliver of ivory if it's made before 1918. Or perhaps a piece of furniture made before 1947 with only a very, very small amount of ivory in it. So did you know that sometimes people capture wildlife as pets? An elephant would be a difficult house guest because they eat more vegetables in a day than your parents buy each week. Some of you might be delighted at the thought of a pet who would eat all your vegetables, but an elephant eats over 150 kilograms of vegetables a day compared to about 1 or 2 kilograms for a human might eat. So just imagine how many trips to the supermarket that would be each week. So we're going to vote again. What do people trade as pets? Do they trade cheetahs or rhinos? The actual correct answer is cheetah. It's very sad when a cheetah is taken. They're a wild cat. So moving on to why is it bad to buy, sell, trade, smuggle wild animals? Well, obviously we don't want elephants, giraffe, zebra, rhino, pangolin, tigers, leopards and sea turtles to all die out. These are beautiful creatures and they keep the world and the food chain in balance. But there's a big health reason as well why we want to stop the endangered wildlife trade. When we trade these animals, there's a bigger risk of diseases passing from a wild animal to humans. And when this happens, they call it a zoonotic disease. Did you know about 7 out of 10 infectious diseases that affect people start in animals? These zoonotic diseases have been responsible for all recent outbreaks and pandemics that have threatened our global health, such as COVID-19, HIV, and Ebola. New zoonotic diseases are emerging now at an alarming rate. In their natural habitat, these diseases pose little threat to people and circulate harmlessly within the wildlife population. You may not have heard of a pangolin before, but they are the most smuggled mammal in the world. And here's a really beautiful photo by Neil Aldridge from WWF. And it's thought that 2.7 million pangolins are smuggled from Africa each year. Now that's bad because a pangolin eats about 70 million insects a year using its long, long, sticky tongue. And if we lose even one pangolin, it upsets the balance of the world's insects to animals. So why might humans kill these creatures? Well, they're killed firstly for their scales. And scales are simply made out of keratin, which is substance like our hair. It's what you find in the hoof of cattle and sheep. You'd also find it in the horn of a rhino, and that's why rhinos are killed. And they're also sold for another reason, meat. and that is eaten as a delicacy in some countries. If the trade in endangered wildlife is illegal, why do you think people might do it? So there's one key answer, and that is money. Poverty drives poaching, and sometimes the people living near endangered wildlife are poor. They're paid money to kill the wildlife, and others are then paid money to transport it around the world. Others are paid to turn a blind eye at customs when it's smuggled over borders. And then more people still are paid to make things from it. And this is all driven by what we call organised crime. The illegal wildlife trade is the 4th largest organised crime globally. There are gangs of people who create smuggling chains transporting wildlife across the world. So now we're going to turn to a little bit of fun maths, and you'll get to vote on this too. So here's a page, and if you count down, there are 5 elephants on one side and 7 on the other. So I imagine you all know, quick as a flash, that is 35 elephants you're looking at. And 35 elephants is roughly the same number of children you have in your classroom, perhaps. I want you now to imagine your local football stadium, which probably fits a crowd of about 35,000 people. Now I want you to imagine that it is full of elephants. And now, can you imagine 10 football stadiums, each full of 35,000 elephants? So that would be 10 times 35,000, which is 350,000 elephants. And the equation I want you to do is, if 35,000 elephants are killed each year and you have a population of 350,000 elephants, then how many years do we have left to try and stop people killing elephants? So you've got a poll. Do you think it's 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, or 1,000 years? 71% of you thought 10 years, which is the correct mathematical answer to that equation. The actual answer is that no one knows exactly how long elephants have left. And that's because a lot of charities like World Wildlife Fund and Tale2Tail are working extremely hard to try and stop the trade. In 2016, Paul Allen counted most of the elephants in Africa in something called the Great Elephant Census. And that took him 3 years. He flew planes up and down Africa, and he got to most places, not all. And he thought there were just over 350,000 elephants in Africa. In Asia, there's between 20 and 40,000 elephants. 10 years ago, African elephants were being killed at an alarming rate of 35,000 a year. It is now estimated that that number's come down, and it's maybe 25,000 a year being killed. But that still means that there's a very big risk that in your lifetime, elephants may become extinct. So we have to all work really hard to stop that from happening. So we can have another vote. I think now you might know the answers to all these questions, so we'll do it quite quickly. The first question is, do you know what ivory is? Yes or no? I imagine that is, you all know that. Ivory is made from a white stone, true or false? Ivory comes from the tusks of an elephant, true or false? People in the UK are allowed to buy and sell ivory, true or false? Would it matter to you if there were no more elephants left in the world? And I think on the last one, everyone cared about that. And you can vote whether you think children can help save wildlife, true or false. Those are amazing results. I'll just tell you a little bit about what we do at Tale2Tail. We believe that that final answer to that question of whether children can help save wildlife is a resounding yes. And children can do it because children have one thing in common. They're always growing up. And as they do, they talk to each other. Sometimes they even talk to adults. And eventually they become the adults. And that is a powerful medium for change. And we think at Tale2Tail what children think really matters and that you can help. And what we've done to make it easy for you is to create some lessons to help you argue the case with your friends and adults which will then make you animal ambassadors, speaking for the wildlife who are not being heard. We also have a play where children can try and stop an ivory smuggling ring. And we have even more art lessons from Axel Scheffler, the fantastically talented illustrator of the Gruffalo. And we have photography lessons from David Yarrow, who takes the most breathtaking wildlife photography in the world. And these fun interactive materials help children learn more about wildlife and the illegal wildlife trade, because we think what young people think really matters. It's really fun to draw. I love drawing, and I hope you've enjoyed my illustrations today. But now, hopefully we have time to end with a short 3-minute film, which is available in English, French, Spanish, and Mandarin.
Hello, I'm Axel Scheffler. I'm an illustrator for children's books, and I'm going to show you how I draw an elephant in my style, in the Axel Scheffler way. I would start by doing a pencil drawing first. They've got huge ears, and then they've got quite bulgy, long trunk, and then the big tusks, and a little eye, and then the mouth is always quite difficult. And then I take my dip pen, which looks like this, what people used to write with. So I would start, just like many children when they draw at school or in the nursery, by doing the outlines. Of course, you can use anything to do a drawing. You don't have to have a dip pen like that. You can use felt pens, and you can use your fingers, and you can use brushes or color pencils. So the tusks are sometimes, you also have to look where they are actually attached when you want to draw them, which is not so easy. Tusks are obviously the big thing why elephants are being killed in Africa in large numbers, and we have to protect them. And maybe I can add a little frog just to show the scale. Oh, that's too big really. And then I can start coloring in. Now I've got lots and lots of little ink bottles, liquid watercolors. So I've noticed they're gray, but they're also quite brownish. I've got my own special technique of drawing, but there are many, many other ways of drawing. What I'm doing is basically the same what any child could do. I'm basically using watercolors and color pencils. It's very, very good for children to try out lots of things and experiment with lots of different paints and colors, because the more you try out, the more interesting your pictures become. But it needs to dry. It dries quite quickly, but sometimes I'm not patient enough and then I mess it up. I can start doing the color pencils. I'm doing a bit of shading, so a little bit darker on one side and lighter on the other side, so that gives it a bit of volume. I use the same colors as with the inks. I use darker and lighter grays and browns to get the elephant color right. But this strengthens the colors, it makes them vibrant really. And it makes the animal look a little bit more realistic. I do try to give them a lot of expression, so you kind of feel sympathetic towards the animal. You kind of feel a certain likeness, and you think you might know what the animal is kind of thinking. And I'm trying to give a lot of expression to all my characters, and I think that's part of the secret of the success, why the books are so popular. But the last thing I would do, which I'm going to do now, I think, is to redraw the outlines and maybe add again a few more little details, like a few little hairs on top, wrinkles. So now we give him a little smile. So I don't think this back line is I'm not very proud of that, and I don't think it's very realistic. I don't think elephants really look like that, but if you show that picture to anybody, then ask what it was, nobody would say it's a rhino or a hippo. There's always a little bit of freedom for artists to draw their own version of the animals, so we can get away with a lot. So there it is.
So now we are going to move on to hear from Paul. Paul is our Chief Wildlife Advisor here at WWF. He's going to share some fascinating facts with you about some animals. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Kate, for a fantastic talk, and for Axel as well for his drawing video. So I'm going to talk through a few facts, a few questions as well, very light-hearted. but just to take you through some things around the illegal wildlife trade. And as Amy says, I work at WWF. I'm the Chief Advisor Wildlife. Okay, so the first question that this will come up just now that I wanted to ask was whether the illegal wildlife trade only affects animals. True or false? Now, this won't be a poll like the last one. This is just something for you to think in your heads or to jot down. So true or false, the illegal wildlife trade only affects animals. And it's false. You'll see in the picture there some timber coming from trees. So the illegal wildlife trade affects animals like Kate was talking about, but also affects plants and trees and things like fish and insects as well. So first fact, India has the largest number of wild tigers in the world. We think there's around about 3,000 tigers left in India. And something that you may not have known is that their urine smells like buttered popcorn. And I can tell you that that is true. I used to work up at London Zoo, and the tigers there, the urine smells just like buttered popcorn. Don't ask me why. So we mentioned that there's around about 3,000 tigers left in India, but India is not the only place they're found, but it is the place with the highest number. So how many tigers do we think are left in the world? So again, it's just thinking in your head or just jotting down the answers wherever you're sitting. But we have around 500, around 3,900, nearly 10,000, and around 40,000. What do we think? So the answer is around 3,900. Now, if we go back about 100 years to the turn of the 20th century, we think that there are around about 100,000 tigers. So there's been a decline of nearly 95% in 100 years, and that's due to illegal wildlife trade and also to habitat loss. So I don't know if you can see from the picture, but that is a marine turtle. And what you can probably see, or I hope you can see, is that they don't have any teeth. And what they have is a sharp beak that's actually made from keratin, which, if you remember, Kate was telling you is the same sort of thing that pangolin scales are made out of. It's also the same sort of thing that our fingernails and hair is made out of. And a fact that you may not have also known about turtles is that they are an ancient group of animals. When the dinosaurs were roaming the land, sea turtles were in the sea, and they're still with us today. So rhinos. So there's a picture there of a white rhino. There are 5 species of rhino in the world today, and 4 of them, unfortunately, are threatened with extinction. The black rhino in Africa, the one-horned rhino in Asia, and the Javan and Sumatran rhinos in Indonesia. The Javan rhino, for example, is down to as few as 70 individuals, so critically endangered. But all rhinos are huge. The smallest rhino, which is a Sumatran rhino, is around about 600 kilograms. The biggest that we see here is a white rhino, and they can weigh up to 3,500 kilos. That's 3.5 tons, and that's about the same as 2 cars. So just think about that. That's a big animal. And this one, I think, if you remember, you might, from Kit's conversation, how much food does one elephant need to eat in a day? Is it 15 kilos or 150 kilos? They're both a lot, but if you can remember which it is that an adult elephant might eat in a day. And the correct answer is 150 kilos. And if you think about the size of an elephant, and all it's eating is vegetable matter, so grass and leaves and things like that. Although it's a lot, that still makes a huge animal. And the elephant's obviously famous not just for its tusks, but its trunk. How many muscles do you think are in an elephant's trunk? 5,000 or 150,000? The answer is 150,000. Now, elephant's trunk is the most incredible organ, incredibly dexterous and sensitive. And an Asian elephant, when you think about it, can use its trunk, which is basically just an extended top lip, to pick up a peanut, take the shell off, flick the shell away, and eat the peanut, all just with its trunk. And you can imagine even just doing that with one hand is tricky enough, let alone with your top lip. Another fact, the picture there is of the beautiful snow leopard. They're found in Central Asia, up in the high mountains. But an interesting thing, despite being a big cat, is that they can't roar. You may have heard lions roar or leopards, but snow leopards don't roar, but they can still be heard. What they emit is a high yowl that's so loud it can actually be heard over the roar of a river across either side of a valley up in the high mountains. And sticking with big cats, what do we think this might be? A leopard or a cheetah? And the answer is it's a leopard. So the leopard is actually the big cat with the widest range. So formerly it was found from the tip of South Africa, all the way through Africa, across the Middle East, through Asia, as far across as the Russian Far East. So the most wide-ranging big cat on Earth. And I think that I'll pause there, and then we can hopefully answer some of the questions that you might have put in the Q&A box. So let me stop sharing my screen.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Paul. Lovely to hear those amazing, fascinating animal facts. They were absolutely fascinating. I didn't know about the elephant being able to peel that peanut just with its trunk. That's amazing. Okay, so we have had loads of questions in the Q&A now. So if we have Kate and Paul ready, I can see you are both ready to answer some of these questions. I'm afraid we've had 140 questions in the Q&A, and we're not going to be able to answer all of them, everyone, but we'll do our best to answer a few of them now. We'll answer them for about five, maybe 8 minutes of answering some questions. Okay, so one question that I had through from a school who sent this through before the webinar, they said, what is the most endangered animal? And this is from Menorah Foundation School. What is the most endangered animal? Paul, do you want to answer that?
Let's see. So thinking about what we've been talking about today, I think if we look at the rhinos in Indonesia, the Sumatran rhino and the Javan rhino are down to a very small number of individuals, and that means that they're critically endangered and facing the threat of extinction. So the Javan rhino, there's probably 70, maybe one or two more individuals in one national park on the island of Java in Indonesia. So they're in a very precarious position, and their future is uncertain.
Okay, another question I've got in. What do pangolins eat? Does anyone know the answer to that one?
I do. I'm very fascinated by pangolins. They have this really long tongue and it extends all the way down their body, and they stick it into ant holes and termite holes, and they need a lot of insects each day to survive. They're supposed to eat, an adult pangolin is supposed to eat 70 million insects a year. So it's, the termites, the ants, those sort of things. Is that right, Paul?
Okay, another one. How long do elephants live for?
They're a bit like us, aren't they, Paul? They live a long time. They live 60, 80 years.
They can do. Particularly some of the older matriarchs can last sort of 60, 70 years, sometimes a bit longer in captivity, but they do. But the same as a human lifespan.
Okay. So this one, a bit of a difficult question. Why do people still trade ivory even though it is illegal? Kate, do you want to go with that one?
So I think that they still trade ivory because of money and because there's a lot of organised criminal groups that push it. So I'd say the main reason is money, and they don't realise, well, I think people are starting to realise, so often for a local community, an elephant is worth far more to them alive than it is dead. because, you know, in times where we aren't locked down, tourists go and visit those sites. And they're really interesting economic studies which show how much more valuable an elephant is to the local communities. And I think they're starting to learn that. So I'd say the key answer is money, but there's also cultural issues of beauty. Some people find a carving very beautiful to look at. And what we would hope is that they say that was in the past and now they have to find something else to carve with, because there aren't enough elephants left.
Okay, another question. What other animals do you know that are imported as pets? So we talked about those cheetahs there. Which other animals are being imported as pets?
So interestingly, lots of different types of animals are imported as pets, some legally, but also illegally. And in places like the UK and other parts of Europe and North America, we are one of the major destinations for lizards, birds, often rare and endangered species that collectors of pets like to have. So things like African grey parrots that you might have heard of, or chameleons, those can be species that are illegally traded as pets.
Okay, this one's a bit of a nicer question for both of you. What is your favourite endangered animal? We'll go for Kate first.
Oh, that's such a hard question because I love them all. I think one of my favorites at the moment is the pangolin, because they're so gorgeous and they're the most smuggled mammal, and they're so important. If you lose a pangolin, it's like losing the rubbish collectors, or imagine if your rubbish wasn't collected. So it really throws the world out of balance because of the huge number of insects they eat each year, and that just keeps it all nice. We're not getting bitten by too many insects, and it keeps everything in balance. So at the moment it's pangolin, but it does change, and I do adore elephants, of course.
Okay, you stole mine, kid. I'd have gone for pangolin too, although I never thought of them as a nature stuff man. But that's a great way of framing it. So let's see. So the things we've talked about today, I'm like you. There's so many different animals that I love, but let's think about tigers maybe as an incredible, emblematic, charismatic species, and threatened by illegal wildlife trade, but also a species that, as a top predator, plays an essential role in its habitat and its environment by the things that it preys on, the behavior that it engenders. If there's a tiger around, often other creatures are a bit more frightened. So it has this key role in terms of how other animals behave and their numbers. So it has a huge influence on the environment around it. And obviously they're just incredibly cool.
Lovely. Love a pangolin and love a tiger. Okay, we'll go with one more question because we're just not going to get through all of these questions today. So my last question that I've had, this has popped up quite a few times. How many endangered animals are there in the wild? Roughly how many?
So I think there are 38,700, but I hand over to Paul. That's on the CITES list. 38,700 of those, about 6,000 are animals, and the rest plants. What do you think, Paul?
So the short answer to that is it's difficult to know. Certainly the number that are listed within CITES as being regulated as endangered species in international trade is close to 40,000, so 38,000. There are well in excess of 100,000 species listed on the IUCN Red List within the extinction categories, which is where experts get together and think about sort of what's the information that we know about a species and how threatened is it or facing extinction. What we do know is that there are a huge number of species that are currently threatened. There's a recent big international study which estimated that anything up to 1 million species could be going extinct in the not too distant future. So we're in a real biodiversity crisis. So we need to be taking steps to protect these species, to look after nature and ensure that these things don't happen.
Okay, fantastic answers there from both of you. So lots and lots of endangered animals all across the world. So thank you all so much for joining, and we're going to say goodbye now.